music, so we're just live.
All right, we're live. It is. Hello there, boys and girls, and welcome to another episode of Circling the Bases, proudly a part of NBC Sports EDGE. I am your host, Colin Henderson. Joining me today, as always, Mr. Christopher Crawford. Chris, people will hear this tomorrow, so now we have about who's winning, and you can either look really good or really bad at the end of it.
I didn't hear your question, but I'm going to assume that you were talking about, let's say the NHL playoffs. I'll go with the New York Rangers to make you happy. But yeah, unfortunately, you cut off a little bit at the end of that question, and that's okay. Oh, it looks like it's just me now, and that's okay too. We're going to be talking streamers, or no, we're not. We're going to be talking about Colin's having some technical difficulties, and it has created a little bit of a giggle storm for me, if I'm being completely honest with you. Um, we're going to be talking about drops and holds, players that you may want to look at cutting bait, and we are officially at the 1/3 of the point of the season for most teams, so it's officially that time where you really got to start making some difficult roster decisions. We will, by the way, anybody who's joining us live via Twitch, if you have somebody on your roster that you're considering making the add or drop, by all means, we will be happy to answer those questions. Hopefully, we can get Colin back here in just a second. He looks like he's trying to get in right now. Yeah, this is just kind of one of those things that happens. Colin, I see, almost see you. I see your little diagram type of thing. But yeah, we're going to be talking ads and drops. Can you hear me, Colin?
We're going audio. We're going audio only today. That's how this is. Yep, I can hear you. Can you hear me,
I can
Chris?
hear you. It's still a
I hope
little
so.
it's still a little
I
frequency-esque, but that's just the way this is going to have to work. But I don't hear
give me one
Colin
last second.
now.
Apologies,
No,
everyone.
that's okay. This is what
This
happens
happens.
when you do live recordings, folks.
Okay.
Just don't swear, Colin. Colin, whatever you do, don't swear. If you can hear me, do not swear. Yep, we are vamping. Yeah, so we're going to be talking about, again, ads and drops. It's going to be one of those things where we will get Colin back, I am sure. I'm confident that we will be able to get him back. I think it's been kind of an interesting start to the first third of the season. We have some really dominant baseball teams right now. We have the Yankees, who are on pace to break my Seattle Mariners record right now. I got to be honest with you, a little nervous about it. The only reason I'm not 100% nervous that they're going to break my record is because I think that that division is so tough. The Red Sox, the Rays, and of course the Blue Jays all look like playoff teams to me. So it's going to be pretty tough, I think, to win 117 when you have to play those teams so often. But they look so good. The Dodgers, outside of a series against the Pirates of all teams, a sweep in that situation is just to say I didn't see that coming is quite interesting. Just because this is one thing I love about baseball too. Anybody can beat anybody. Literally any team could beat any team. It's pretty awesome. It just goes to show you. I did see somebody bet $150,000 on the Dodgers to win by 2.5 to only win $130,000. Must be nice to have that kind of money to make that kind of bet. It felt, I wouldn't say it felt bad for that person, because if you have that kind of money to bet, but it's still, I mean, I think I would have been, if I was making bets, betting on the Dodgers to win one of those games against the Pirates. But again, that's what happens in this crazy sport. Colin, I think we might be getting back here in just a second. Appreciate everybody who's putting up with my rambling while we're dealing with this. And again, if you have any questions whatsoever, for those of you who are joining us via Twitch, please let us know. Happy to answer them. We know that this is one of the most difficult times for drops and holds, because It's time for you to make your playoff moves, folks. It is time to, if we were a different show, say a certain word and get off the pot. But we know it's difficult. I have had to make some difficult roster decisions myself, mostly with outfielders as of late. In fact, somebody asked me about an outfielder the other day. We'll get into like Tyler O'Neill, how patient you need to be with him now that he's off the injured list. We'll talk about Adley Rutschman, who, one of the best catching prospects in baseball, who hasn't gotten off to such a hot start. Is he somebody that you need to start considering? Possibly. It is going to be, hey, Colin, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I can hear you perfectly.
All right, there we go. We're doing this way. We're running it. We're as you used the sentence before. We're MacGyvering it today. All right.
Yeah.
We're all gonna figure this out.
It kind of looks like I'm talking to the HAL 9000 right now. So
Can
you just give me, I can't do that for you?
I cannot do that for you, Chris.
Thank you very much.
I am sorry, Chris, but that is not in my core programming.
That's so great.
I will do this the entire show if needed.
Please and thank you.
I genuinely would do this for the entire show just for fun, but the show's already ridiculous in its own right. We might as well keep it somewhat professional from here on out. I know Chris has been vamping for the last 3 minutes like a true professional as I frantically waved around to get back on this pod. But thank you to everyone who has stuck with us through this. For those in podcast form, this will hopefully sound a lot better once edited. Thank you, Tim, ahead of time.
Yes.
So coming up on the show today, as Chris mentioned, we are going to be doing a little drop or not June edition. We did this back in May and it was very successful and it seemed like it helped a lot of people. As Chris was mentioning before I popped on, this is one of the hardest things that any fantasy manager has to do is part ways potentially with someone you drafted inside the top 15 rounds. Those are supposed to be your guys. They now might not be. We're going to talk about a bunch of them. But before we do get to them, weekends are better. They are simply better with MLB Sunday Leadoff, coverage presented by Uber Eats. This week, catch the Athletics face the Guardians in Cleveland on Sunday, June 12th at 11:30 a.m. Eastern, live on NBC and Peacock. To learn more, go to peacocktv.com/MLB. And if you want a chance to win $25,000 on the game, 25 large, download the NBC Sports Predictor app powered by PointsBet and enter Sunday's free Grand Slam Pick'em contest. All right, before we get to the drop or not, we have a big breaking story that came out of the baseball world today that we obviously have to talk first, and that is Joe Maddon, Angels manager, is ousted, let go, surprised by the team's decision to let him go after 12 straight losses. The Angels obviously came out to a great start to the year on a 27-17 record, but since then 12 straight losses has dropped them to 27-29. That's good enough for 8.5 games out of first place in the AL West already. Phil Nevin takes over as interim manager. Maddon went 130 and 148 with LA, failing to reach the postseason in his 2+ years. And like I said before, it came as a surprise. He asked if it was a surprise, quote, a little bit, actually a lot. You always rely on people in charge to read the tea leaves properly. This time they did not. So he is not going out on his own accord. Chris, obviously talk about just Maddon leaving in the first place and then any potential fantasy implications that come from this.
I mean, I guess it's always a surprise to there's no date that they decide when you're going to get fired or something like that. So I guess in that sense, he could be surprised. He shouldn't be. I mean,
right. That's what I was about to say. Yeah.
He went 26-34 and finished 4th place in 2020. He went 77-85 in 2021 and finished in 4th place. In 2022, he's in 2nd place, but he's 2 games under 500. While having, for the most part, there were some injuries that he dealt with. One of the most talented rosters in baseball. Yes, it's not his fault that the pitching stinks. He is not in charge of signing the pitchers that they have. But you can't say that Joe Maddon made the Angels better. It is impossible for you to say that unless the Angels were just really bad. Getting them to 77 wins and 26 wins in that truncated season isn't impressive to me. I don't know if there's any fantasy implications. We have no track record of what Phil Nevin is going to look like as a manager. He was an aggressive base run sender, so I wonder
Yeah,
if we
that's what
will
I was
be.
about to say.
I
Ugh.
wonder if we'll see. If I wonder if we'll see some more stolen base attempts for guys. That's something to maybe keep an eye on. Which would be, they need to keep Mike Trout healthy, but maybe he runs a little bit more. There's just no concrete evidence of that. The only thing I'll say about Phil Nevin is that I have a funny story that once I went to go get his autograph in Tacoma while he was a member of the Houston organization. And remember, Phil Nevin was a first overall pick, and he's the
Yep.
second manager, I believe, to ever manage games outside of a Harold Baines doing 4 games as an interim manager. But anyway, I went to get his autograph because everybody told me that he was the next big thing. And I had him sign in the middle of the baseball, and somebody else was getting ready over there. And I was like, oh, I'll just have him sign next to it. And the guy signed right over Phil Nevin's signature, and he said he was doing me a favor. So that is.
Can you please tell me who the other player was? Because now I have to
No,
know that.
no, because I don't know who it is, and I have
Okay. All right. That's totally fair.
I have done the internet sleuthing to try to figure out who it is, but sorry, Joe Madden. I think this is deserved. And while I don't believe that you are truly at fault for what the Angels are going through, you got to make your team better. And I don't think he actually made the team better.
Yeah, I was trying to think of Joe Madden. If you took away the name Joe Madden and just looked at the resume, there's absolutely no conversation to be had here. The only thing you could say is from a longer standpoint, sure, he has gotten to World Series. He has won one. I think he won one with Chicago. He's rejuvenated older rosters. He's done a lot of good things. He's, for a guy who is 68 years old, has always had a very open mind to a lot of changes and stuff.
Right.
I mean, he was one of the first guys who really implemented that shift that now everyone wants to get rid of. So all of that aside, the Angels have been very much treading water since he came there. He came there as essentially a stopgap. And since then, nothing has changed. Nothing good other than if you take away the magical year of Ohtani last year, there has been nothing of note that the Angels have done for the last 2.5 seasons. I actually think I'm completely for this move. I will say he is saying that there's no finger pointing in the locker room, like he hasn't lost the locker room. That was essentially why he was, quote, surprised. That's great that you haven't lost the locker room, but you've lost 12 straight games in a row and you have a losing record in 2 years. So I don't really care if the players still love you. You're not getting W's, and that's what you're here for. So I mean, I would expect a team, Madden said afterward in an interview with The Athletic, that he's still very much interested in coaching. It would not surprise me if he has a new job at the start of next season.
No.
But this is like he's got a little bit of a track record of kind of running not so much his teams into the ground, but whether it's personally or whether it's professionally, like he kind of lost the locker room in a couple places. This one, it just seems like he could not get enough W's to actually stay there. So he's while he has a very has very good highs, he's also has some pretty deep lows that we kind of don't always attribute to a guy of his stature.
No, and I think that what it is, it's 2 things. One, what I think it speaks to is how good the general managers and the front offices have been at the places that he's been. That is one.
Very good point.
Say what you want about Theo Epstein and say what you want about how I hate Tampa Bay doesn't spend any gosh darn money. They've been really good at what they do, and the Angels really have not since 2003, other than getting lucky with the Millville Meteor. But really, what you were saying is he has not been a good Boy Scout, and what I mean is he has not left his situation better than he came into it, and that would be concerning for me. If I was a team that I thought was like right on the cusp, he might make sense to me for the Phillies, just for like a year to see if you could turn this thing around. Like that might be something that I would be interested in. But if I'm a young rebuilding team, I think I'm definitely looking elsewhere.
The Phillies are basically just the Angels of the East.
Yeah.
I mean, really, just like, hey, with
the Phillies
Dombrowski
got 2 managers fired.
Right, 2 managers fired. They've got Dave Dombrowski as a GM who is just throw all your chips to the center. Like, actually, kind of makes a lot of sense there. But Madden will be coaching somewhere soon. He just won't be coaching for either of our teams. Let's get to some drop or not here. And like I said, if you're watching this live on Twitch at all and have any drop or nots, please If you're struggling with anyone, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. We'll be happy to discuss anybody. But let's start off with someone I just had to cut from one of my main teams, and that's Javier Baez. I mean, Javier Baez is, when going, is one of the most fun players in the league, but this year, no so good. Still 87% rostered in Yahoo leagues, but he is slashing 198, 234, 305 with just 3 home runs and 15 RBIs and 10 runs scored. 0 stolen bases for a guy that we absolutely require him moving around the bags for him to be valued at where we had at the beginning of the season. And he already has 46 strikeouts to only 6 walks and 167 at-bats. For those of you, it seems so long ago, but he did sign that 6-year, $140 million contract with Detroit in the hopes of bridging their rebuilding team to their championship team. And so far, those results have been real bad. So obviously, from a loaded shortstop, he is also second base eligible because of his time at second base last year. So he does have dual eligibility, but he has just simply been an absolute drag on teams, especially points teams in points leagues where those strikeouts are just negative. I was looking at one of my main point leagues. This point in the season, he has less than 45 points. He has done nothing for you. So I just had to drop him in that points league. He is on another 1 or 2 of my rosters, and he is very close to being dropped if it weren't for a deeper league. Chris, in a 12-team standard, are you holding on to Javi for hopefully a second half resurgence? Or are you bailing?
I'm certainly taking him out of my starting lineup. I'm probably hanging on to him if I have 5 bench spots, just because I'm not quite sure. Unless you're like desperate for some like starting pitching streaming, then I think you can justify.
Sure.
The fact we're talking about the fact that you can justify dropping him, it makes him one of the biggest fantasy disappointments. My only thing that I would say is we have seen this before, where Javier Baez gets off to a poor start and then goes through a couple of weeks / months that basically like put you right back into contention. There's no doubt that he is capable of doing that, but this isn't a slow start anymore. We are a third of the way through the year, and I think the fact that there's no stolen bases here is very telling. It makes me wonder if he's 100% healthy, because even like, he's no longer like a speed demon, but you need like that 15 to 20 stolen base to justify the fact that he's going to hit below average, literally and figuratively, in average. I think it's something that you really have to consider. And if you have good options up the middle, it is perfectly okay to cut bait. None of these players, by the way, we're saying that you have to drop. We're just saying that if you are considering Javier Baez and if you're considering moving on from him, it is not crazy whatsoever.
No, it's not crazy. And you mentioned a 5 bench spot. Yeah, if I had 5 bench spots, I'd probably still have Javier Baez on, say, the one team that I had dropped him on. But with 3, and for the number of injuries that have already piled up throughout the year, and I know everyone out there is holding on to IL people. A lot of people have cut IL people, which means that they're eligible for you to add to your roster. I know in a couple leagues, Tyler O'Neill's and Mitch Haniger's and Brandon Lau's have fallen to the wayside just because teams can't hold on to them any longer. Well, guess what? Then that means you should be adding them to your roster. So at the moment, Báez has shown nothing. The Tigers literally had to sit him for about a 2 to 3 game period in the hopes that that would get his head straight. And then he proceeded to go hitless against the Yankees with 5 strikeouts across 3 games. So, I mean, it just has not looked good. I think right now there's no trade value for him, so you can get absolutely nothing for him on the wire. If someone wants to give him to you, if someone wants to trade you anything for him, I think I'd take it at this point. But yes, at the end of the year, Javi Baez will probably have similar stats to what we like, but it has been real rough sledding for anyone who has rostered him so far.
No, and that's the thing is like, and that's the reason why you consider him is just because there is this track record of doing it. But man, I'm just looking at these Baseball Savant page. This is ugly. Like,
yeah, real bad.
We knew that the walks were going to be an issue. There was this brief glimmer of hope because he started taking more free passes for a little bit last year. That was way too small of sample size. He's in the bottom 3%. He's in the bottom 1 percentile in trace rate. It's not bad luck. His expected batting average is in the 7th percentile. Only thing he really has going for him is that he's been good defensively, and his max exit velocity shows that when he makes contact, he can hit baseball a long, long way. Everything else here suggests that Javier Baez can become roster fodder, and I don't like saying that.
Let's move on to Blake Snell now. Somebody else who is similarly rostered, 85% rostered. He had been out for over a month with a left adductor strain. That being said, the results so far this year, no so good. We're still waiting for this former Cy Young Blake Snell, who everyone ranted at the Rays for trading when they did. And boy, the Rays continue to look good from that trade because Snell has just not looked the same. So far on the year, he is 0-3 with a 5.68 ERA, 1.37 WHIP, and 22 strikeouts and 11 walks across 19 innings. That's only 4 starts. So it is a small sample size, admittedly. But for those who have been holding on to Blake Snell throughout his injuries and then have been getting the actual stuff, his actual performance so far, it has been a third of the year of nothing from Blake Snell. And it has got to be absolutely crushing to have held on to a guy who, again, a former Cy Young winner on a team that should have plenty of wins in there. Right. And he is just unable to do so far. So, Chris, how are you feeling about Blake Snell right now? Is he potentially droppable for you, or is he someone that you're still holding on and believing for the rest of the year?
It's a tough one. I'm still holding on, especially if I've held on this long. And I will say, again, it's a small sample size. I'm very concerned about the walks because this has been something that's been an issue for Blake Snell for a long time. And, you know, the whip is going to get hit hard because of the fact that he is just going to issue too many free passes. He's also in the 85th percentile so far in whiff rate. He's getting hitters to chase at his pitches at a solid rate. He is missing bats. His fastball velocity looks fine. He's getting good movement on his fastball as well. So what I would say is he has become, and this is unfortunate for somebody who was once like a top 30 draft pick, someone that is kind of matchup dependent. If he's facing somebody who has a bunch of patient hitters in the lineup, like the Dodgers, or it's funny to say, like the Mariners, who just don't swing at pitches outside of the strike zone right now, that's a tough matchup for him. But if he faces a lineup that is not like super patient, still a guy I'm having in, because even if he does have a few walks, and a few is kind of an understatement, I guess, there's just enough upside with the strikeouts that I'm leaving him in the lineup. But it is sad to say that I think Blake Snell is now a streamer.
He has got back-to-back matchups against Colorado, at Colorado and away from, in San Diego and then at Coors Field in his next 2 starts.
Yeah.
If you're holding on to him this long, and I totally respect giving him 2 more starts, going up against Colorado in this spot, I think is exactly what you need to see. Like, there you go, especially away from Colorado and then in Colorado. If he can't do those 2, I think that's enough for me to go, okay, I'm going to waste my time elsewhere rather than continuing to drive this home. So back-to-back starts against Colorado, I think that's where we draw the line. If for some reason there is a rain out here, he would get the Cubs in that conversation as well. Again, similarly, a below average offense, I'm still using that as my barometer for, am I going to keep him?
Sure, that's totally fair.
And I think it also makes sense, by the way, this is a San Diego team that has like 9 starters that they could theoretically use in that rotation. So if Snell were to become someone who struggles a little bit more, it would not shock me at all if they say, okay, you know what? You're going to be a 2 to 3 inning guy out of the bullpen, and we're going to go there. It would not shock me in the slightest there.
No, and if he's pitching behind an opener, there's value in that.
There is value in that.
If he's pitching in the middle innings, pretty tough to justify.
Let's move over to Yuan Mankata, 58% rostered. He started out the season slowly, then got injured, then has come back and has still been slow. Overall on the year, 149 average with 2 homers, only 6 RBIs, 2 walks, 4 runs, a 425 OPS, and a 22 to 2 K walk ratio across 19 total games. By the way, 22 to 2 K walk ratio is incredibly difficult to say. Yeah. He has been out with a quad injury that took him out for basically about 3 weeks or so, and had struggled, like I said before, picking up that injury. Somewhere in the positive for him is that Juan Mankata has been really good for really long and is only age 27, which still kind of blows my mind. I just think of him as somewhere closer to 30. Sure. He also sports a minuscule .18 BABIP this year. Previous career low in a season, 315. So you got to figure some good luck coming along the way. But there have been a lot of managers who have held on to him for this long and have had to deal with the injury and the underperformance, and they're looking for that. They're hovering over that drop button. Chris, are you clicking it?
I am not, only because of the position that he plays. Third base is just not a good position right now. Now, I will say this. The thing about Moncada and batting average balls in play is his expected batting average is often quite low, in part because he does not make a ton of hard contact. And the big thing that's been weird here is that this is a guy who has normally been a very patient hitter at the plate. Last year, 13.6 walk percentage, which is excellent. 2.6 this year. And what that tells me is that he has a very small sample size. Is Yohan Mankata ever going to be the fantasy player that we thought he was going to be as a prospect? No. He is not ever going to be that top 10, top dozen option that he really looked like he could be in the minors. But I still think he's serviceable enough. And the fact that you have a corner infield position probably and a third base position, especially just because third base is it's not good. It is not a good position right now. I'm still hanging on, but would I be looking to upgrade? You bet your sweet Bippy I would.
Yeah, he was the 16th in Yahoo leagues, 16th third baseman off the board in drafts. And like you said, I went back and forth with this about whether to keep Mankata or not. And it all came down to me, and you hit the nail on the head here. Third base is garbage right now. Third base is a bad, outside the top 5. It is a garbage position where there is not much to differentiate between the 7th best third baseman and the 19th best third baseman. There just really isn't a lot. So for that reason, I think Mankata, unlike many of the other options between 7 and 18, like I just mentioned, has, I think, enough of a ceiling and has enough potential where he could break out of this thing and break into something that is a bona fide top 10 third baseman. I think that is still very much in the cards with him, with just his potential and his power and the team that he's on, that I'm expecting a much better next 2/3 of the year than the first third from really that entire White Sox team.
Totally fair.
But yeah, no, I'm holding on to Mankata a little bit longer just because, again, I just can't imagine there's a whole lot out there that you're willing to replace him with at this point. There just isn't there.
No, but like if someone like Nolan Garman or something like that is still available and eligible for third base in Yahoo leagues, then yeah, go ahead and do that. But there's just too much expletive on the market for me to suggest dropping Yoan Mankata. Next time, draft a third baseman higher.
Would you, I mean, for rest of season, like name game this thing, would you rather have Nolan Garman or Yoan Mankata?
Nolan Garman. Like the only concern I have with Nolan Garman is the fact that I do wonder how much he's going to play against left-handed pitching. And, that's something that, it's good for his rates, but it hurts the overall numbers. It hurts your chances to drive in runs. It's all of that stuff. But I'm really big on Nolan Garman. I have been really impressed with what I have seen. I love that he's hitting at or near the top of he's hitting near the top of that lineup. There's an awful lot to like about that fantasy prospectus, both this year and in long term, of course.
Let's go over to Ian Anderson, the 24-year-old starter for the Braves. After 2 phenomenal years and 2 phenomenal postseasons in his first 2 years, has started to come back down to earth. Still 77% rostered, but he's 4-3 with a 4.7 ERA, a 1.4 WHIP, and only 45 strikeouts across 53 2/3 innings. And he's walked 24 and served up 8 home runs already. Just for some context, he had allowed 17 home runs in his previous 30 regular season starts entering this year. He has 8 and 10 starts this year. So guys getting this ball elevated. And by the way, that is with offense down across the league, and he's still getting the ball hit hard on him. Also, his K percentage has dropped from 29, almost 30% in his rookie year to below 20% this year so far. So, Chris, Ian Anderson has been a wild disappointment so far this year. Are you holding on or are you dropping?
I'm still holding on, but I got to be honest with you. You got to give it another couple of starts and then start really thinking about it, because he has not been good. And I'll tell you something that really concerns me here is that fastball spin and curve spin, he is in the bottom 1 percentile, which tells me that his pitches are just not getting a lot of movement. And Ian Anderson has always dealt with control issues. Now, he's never really dealt with command issues. There is a difference between the two. He has always been, to quote another podcast, effectively wild. He's not effectively wild right now. Like, there is serious command issues that are going on with Ian Anderson, and the fact that he's not generating a ton of movement, it kind of makes me wonder if everything is okay or if there's some sort of mechanical change that he's going to need to make. He's actually avoiding barrels pretty well. He's not giving up a ton of round trippers, which is nice to see. But just because of his limited but successful track record and the fact that there's so much baseball still left to be played, I can't imagine that there are a ton of better waiver wire options in terms of pitching than Ian Anderson.
I think if I'm an Ian Anderson manager, he pitches tonight against Oakland. Or excuse me, tomorrow against Oakland.
Right.
I have to put it properly. Wednesday night against Oakland.
Sure.
Then he pitches at Washington. And then, if I'm doing the math correctly, at Chicago.
Oh,
I think there's your three. Like, that's
friendly.
That's a friendly next three starts. And if I'm an Ian Anderson owner, I'm either looking at these three starts in a bubble and I'm saying, I really hope I see something. I see the old Ian Anderson at some point where I can ride him to the rest of the year. Or I'm looking for him to just do well enough over those next three starts that I can use that as my trade piece to try and move on. Like, look, hey, there you go. If I have lost my faith in him, I'm looking at these three starts. I hope he does well enough in all three of them, so that way I can try and put him in a package to get him off my roster and get somewhere else. His value right now is too low for you to get what I think Ian Anderson could get. Hopefully, somewhere in these three starts, he gives you something really good that you can use to kind of pivot and buy high or sell high.
I think that's exactly right. I mean, that could not be friendlier in terms of scheduling. Like, those are some of the worst lineups in baseball that you're getting a chance to see. So if he's struggling against those guys, it might be time to take a look elsewhere. But this is a very good chance for Ian Anderson to get healthy.
Number 4 catcher off the board in preseason. Average draft 123. Yasmani Grandal, still 67% rostered, but boy, those 67% are holding on for dear life. In 160 at bats, so no longer a small sample here. 156, 269, 206 slash line, which is horrendous.
Yeah.
With 2 home runs, 11 RBIs, 6 runs, and a 475 OPS. And not to outdo Javier Baez, he's got 41 strikeouts right behind him. So, I mean, look, the catcher position, we've discussed this overall. The catcher position is just real bad this year. There's just, I mean, it has been for the last couple of years, but at least in those years, there's been like a top 7 or 8 that you can kind of feel like, okay, these are our starters. This year, I've gotten questions online where like, should I just drop a catcher and not play a catcher and then use that roster use roster flexibility for it? And it's getting harder and harder outside the top 5 catchers for me to make the argument to keep one. So Grandal right now has been at the top of, I mean, right next to Báez is one of the most disappointing players in fantasy so far this year. Chris, the catcher position, like I said, is not deep, but it does have some intriguing options out there. Are you holding on to Grandal or are you looking for somewhere else?
I mean, if he played any other position, this isn't easy. You got to move on.
Yeah.
But he doesn't. And so I think you got to stay patient for a little while longer. He's a weird mix here because, again, if you're playing in an on-base percentage league and if you get points for walks, it's a lot easier to justify just because, like, he's still drawing walks. He's in the 92nd percentile in a walks percentage. He does not swing at pitches outside of the strike zone. I mean, he just doesn't. It is a very impressive approach at the plate, but that approach leads to a lot of 2-strike counts. And while he doesn't strike out like a ton, 49% K percentage isn't horrific by any means. It does mean that his expected batting average drops down because pitchers can make their pitch with 2 strikes. And if you're in a lot of 2-strike counts, it's very hard to hit for a high average. I guess my biggest concern here is that with Grandal, you're really hoping for power, and he is not showing it at all. Expected slugging percentage in the bottom 12th percentile. I can't imagine that there is a guaranteed better catcher on the market, so I've got to hold on to Yasmani Grandal. But man, oh man, if I am a contender, I am looking to upgrade from him for sure.
Would you take Kirk over Grandal rest of the year?
100,000%.
Yep, I would too.
I
Would
just
you
record
take
real quick, just real
younger
quick on
Contreras?
Kirk.
Oh, go for it.
Sorry. I
No,
just
no, go for
recorded
it.
a video. I recorded a video on Alejandro Kirk for Yahoo just the other day, and I did not realize that his page, his Baseball Savant page, is like a Utah election. It is just red, 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 red. This guy might be a star. If you can get, he has a horrible April, but since then he has been one of, if not the best catchers in baseball. Alejandro Kirk is like a must add for me. I'm sorry, go on there, but like I
No,
just
no
couldn't believe
problem.
how good he was. I could not believe how impressive these numbers are.
Would you take him over the younger Contreras, who still has catcher eligibility? Would you take
Uh,
Grandal?
Probably just because I don't know how much Contreras is going to play. If I could
Okay.
guarantee Wilson Contreras is going to be in the lineup even 4 days a week, I would take him. But the counting stats matter.
Would you take Adley Rutschman over Grandal rest of the season?
Yes, and Adley Rutschman's numbers are not pretty right now. There's just way too small a sample size right now. Grandal is one of the catchers that I think he would be dropping for him.
Okay. All right. So that's, I mean, that gives it, I mean, for a guy who was the fourth catcher off the board
Sure.
preseason, I
Yeah.
mean, we've now already fallen him out to at least the back end of the top 10, 12. And
Yeah.
if it weren't for the fact that the catcher position is so thin, he'd
Yeah.
fall even farther.
Yeah. Crazy.
All right, let's talk about someone who was on our drop or not list. I wanted to bring one back. I went back to our prior episode.
Nice.
I wanted to bring one person back just to see how far they've fallen. And Trevor Rogers is our guy, starting pitcher for Miami. Now still 79% rostered, which I'm still a little surprised about, just because he's been real bad. 2-5 with a 5.8 ERA, a 1.56 WHIP, and 39 to 21 K walk ratio across 45 innings. It doesn't take a math major to figure out that that's just way too many walks. Just way too many walks. His strikeout percentage dropped from 28.5% last year to just over 19% this year. And last year was when he was second in Rookie of the Year, when he had a 2.64 ERA and 157 strikeouts in 133 innings. Like I said, this year, 39 Ks across 45 innings so far. So the exact opposite of how good he was last year. We both recommended holding on to him about 4 weeks ago when we did this episode. Chris, has your mind changed?
Yeah. In fact, at this point, it's more, would you consider adding Trevor Rogers more than would you consider dropping Trevor Rogers? And I will say this, in a dynasty format or a keeper format, yeah, I'm still hanging on to Trevor Rogers just because he's
Agreed.
24 years old and he's shown those flashes of the ability. But none of these numbers suggest that Trevor Rogers is a good option right now. He has basically become the epitome of a streamer right now. There is no way that I'm having Trevor Rogers face a quality lineup. The only thing I will say is that if you drop Trevor Rogers, you're probably not getting him back because somebody's going to take a chance on him with pitching so thin right now. So make sure you're comfortable doing it. You got to be comfortable with anything. And I know it's so hard to actually hit that drop button. Lord knows how many times I have changed my mind or hoped my internet froze while I'm waiting for a transaction to go through.
Yes.
But at this point, it is beyond easy to justify letting him go at this point.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. Like, be prepared that you might not get him back if you do drop him. Like, a lot of these other guys, I think you could still get back. Like, I think if you drop Javier Baez right now, you could get him back in a week, and I think that wouldn't be a problem, depending on how deep your league is. I think Trevor Rogers, just because of how good he was last year, is just going to be really difficult to pick back up.
Right.
That being said, like you said, there's been absolutely nothing. There's no evidence this year, in the calendar year of 2022, there's no evidence that he is a good pitcher. There just isn't there just isn't any of that. So, especially with the amount of good pitching on Miami, like they have, and him only 24 years old, there's a real possibility he could get sent down at some point. He has minor league options here for him to theoretically get his head straight.
Sure.
You could be dropping him for nothing, because that I think is very likely, especially with Edward Cabrera coming up and looking great again tonight. And he looked great in his first start. He looked great last year. I mean, he looks ready, and Max Meyer looks right behind him if possible. So, I think Trevor Rogers right now is droppable. I think what I would say, my advice to managers out there. And again, this is entirely dependent on the size and
Sure.
format of your league. But if you have a good record, if you are sitting there, even despite him being on your roster, if you're sitting there only a game or two back from the top spot, if you're looking for playoffs right now and feel pretty confident around your team, Trevor Rogers is a guy I'd still hold on to just because of the potential somewhere in the middle of that. But if you are struggling, if you are 3-5 or worse at this point in a weekly league, if you are absolutely need it, then waivers.
Yeah.
You don't get to patience. Is that something that people with losing record? If you got a winning record, you could be a little bit patient. Trevor Rogers has not earned that spot yet. So I agree with that.
Yeah. By the way, I just wanted to say Chad left a very funny comment when we were talking about Ian Anderson. Is the only logical conclusion is Kyle Wright Space Jam 1'd him. That's very funny.
Oh, that's very funny. I actually like that quite a bit. Now if I see Ian Anderson struggle to like walk down the dugout steps, I'm gonna know it for sure.
Oh.
All right, let's end up with one or two more here. Get some quick. Let's do Eric Hosmer. Look,
Sure.
we both.
Colin, I think I lost you, buddy. Yeah. Yeah, I'm not hearing anything. Colin, I'll take Eric Hosmer real quick. Yeah, you can move on from Eric Hosmer. One of the most impressive starts I think that we saw from him over his career. Certainly has had some success as a fantasy player, but it has often been followed by flashes of not incompetence, but just not worth rostering. I think first base is deep enough that you can be looking at different options here. The metrics are still good, but the metrics are also based on the fact that he got off to such a good start. And I want to always caution this, that when you look at Baseball Savant pages, we are not talking about predictive. We are talking about results. So those results can tell you, yeah, that he deserved better and yada, yada, yada. They're not necessarily predictive of how the player is going to play. So I would be looking to move on from Eric Hosmer if he was my first baseman. It's not the worst thing in the world to have him as a corner infielder, I suppose, partially because, again, we just talked about the fact that there are just not a lot of good options at the first base position. Let's look at another player that we were talking about here. Rolex Chapman. That's an interesting one. I'm moving on from Rolex Chapman because I don't see how you can't have Clay Holmes be your closer right now. And if Aroldis Chapman ends up being your closer, I mean, that being the closer, I think that's going to really bite you in the what, because, you had him and then all of a sudden you're not getting those save chances for, again, a team that I talked about when I was vamping, so to speak, being one of the very best first base, or excuse me, one of the best overall teams in baseball. But I'm really confident in Clay Holmes. That's the guy I'd be rostering. If Clay Holmes isn't available and you need to take a chance with somebody like Chapman to get saves, I guess you can do that. But yeah, I would be looking to move on from Aroldis Chapman at this point. Not the worst roster hold in the entire world because the rate should be good even if he's not the closer, but it's impossible to guarantee that he's going to be an option. It's weird to say, but I think you can absolutely justify dropping a Aroldis Chapman. And boy, oh boy, would I be trying to get Clay Holmes. How impressive has he been? Since Colin's got the internet issues, we'll just go ahead and call it right now. Thank you so much for everybody who's listening. Thank you for everybody on Twitch who dealt with our technical difficulties. These things happen. Live shows. It is what it is. Tomorrow, I will have Matthew Corey from Sox Outsider on the show. And we're going to talk about the Red Sox. We're going to pester him about my boy Jarren Duran, how much I really like him, and hoping that he can be a real fantasy option. Wondering if there are any relievers that are worth rostering on that team. If you like what you heard, please rate us 5 stars. Please subscribe. We really appreciate it. You can follow me on Twitter at Crawford_MILB, and you can follow Colin at Call Don't Lie. So until next time, thank you guys again. We really do appreciate your patience. If you're listening to this in podcast form, you might wonder what the heck we're even talking about, but we really appreciate it, and we will see you guys next time.
Thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for all the latest fantasy and sports betting advice from NBC Sports Edge. And don't forget to sign up for NBC Sports Edge Plus to get the best-in-class draft guides, as well as season-long fantasy, DFS, and sports betting tools that will give you the edge.